Greg Abbott walked into Congress, ready to sell his bill as public safety, but within minutes, Jasmine Crockett ripped the mask off, exposing a blueprint for silencing Texans hidden in plain sight. What followed wasn't a hearing, it was a political demolition, as Crockett dragged every buried clause into the light and left Abbott's entire narrative collapsing in front of the cameras. The hearing room felt tight, heavy when Governor Greg Abbott rolled in with that trademark confidence. His wheelchair was positioned strategically at the center. Staffers straightened their ties. Reporters leaned forward. But at the far end of the table, Jasmine Crockett didn't move. She just watched him, eyes sharp, posture steady, as if she was waiting for the moment his confidence stopped working. She just leaned slightly toward her aide and whispered, almost amused and speaking, "Watch how fast this falls apart." The aide froze. He knew what that tone meant. Crockett wasn't here to ask questions. She was here to dismantle a narrative. Abbott launched into his opening remarks with the rhythm of a man who'd practiced every word. "This bill is about law and order," he said proudly. "It's about restoring safety to our communities." He kept hitting those familiar phrases: public safety, law enforcement tools, protecting families, each line polished, rehearsed, and delivered with the confidence of someone sure the room would eat it up. But Crockett was already scribbling. Not notes, but to record evidence. Red circles, underlines, arrows. Every time Abbott said something, her pen moved faster. At one point, she even let out a small, quiet breath that looked almost like a laugh. Not because what Abbott said was funny, but because she had just spotted another weak point in his argument. When Abbott wrapped up with a proud nod, the room shifted. People glanced at Crockett, and for the first time, Abbott followed their eyes. She was still completely still, but her expression had changed. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Crockett's mouth. Then the chairman picked up his gavel and cleared his throat. "The chair recognizes Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas." The noise in the room evaporated. Even Abbott, who had been steady as stone a minute ago, shifted slightly in his seat. Crockett didn't speak right away. She adjusted her microphone slowly, deliberately. She looked at Abbott, directly with calm. She leaned in like a prosecutor walking up to the witness stand. "Governor," she began, voice steady, "you've said a lot about keeping Texans safe, and I think we all agree safety matters. That's our common ground, right?" Abbott jumped on the lifeline without thinking. "Yes, absolutely," he said, nodding fast, almost eager. "I'm glad we agree." Crockett's smile widened, just enough to be dangerous. "Good," she said softly. "Now let's talk about reality." The shift was instant. Even Abbott's smile faltered, just a little. Crockett flipped open the bill, not slowly, not dramatically, but with the confidence of someone who already knew exactly where the cracks were. "Section 7, she announced, tapping the page with one finger. "Let's start with how you define organized disruption." Then she read it aloud, word for word. "Any gathering of 3 or more persons that creates or has the potential to create interference with normal activities, traffic flow, business operations, or public services." She let the silence hang for a full beat. Then she looked up, eyes locked on Abbott. "Governor," she said, 3 peaceful students standing on a sidewalk. Criminals. That's your bill." The room was silent. People shifted forward in their seats. A reporter whispered, "Oh, damn." Abbott's eyes widened, and he straightened up, scrambling for footing. "Well, Congresswoman, that's not the intent." Crockett didn't let him finish. She just cut straight through his defense like it wasn't even there. "Intent doesn't matter," she said, firm and unshakable. "Language does, and your language criminalizes the First Amendment." Abbott tried again, voice tighter this time. "What you're doing is misinterpreting." "No," Crockett snapped. Quick, controlled, absolutely devastating. "I'm not misinterpreting anything. I'm quoting your bill, the words you signed off on, the words that would turn everyday Texans into criminals for standing outside a school board meeting." Abbott blinked hard. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. His talking points were slipping away like sand in water. Crockett leaned forward just slightly, enough for the cameras to catch the cold precision in her expression. "You told Texans this bill protects them," she said. "But the truth is, Governor, it protects no one. What it does is silence them. Crockett didn't wait for Abbott to recover. She flipped to another tabbed page like she was moving to the next slide in a presentation she'd rehearsed 100 times. "Let's talk about Section 9, she said, her tone tightening, "because this is where your bill stops pretending." She read the lines straight from the text, then lowered the paper. "Governor," she said, eyes locked on him, "you're authorizing police to shut down a protest before it even happens, before anyone breaks a law, before anyone raises a sign, before a single word is spoken." Abbott shifted back, his jaw tightening. "That's not safety," Crockett continued. "That's fear. Government fear. And you're trying to make the public pay for it." The room reacted. Whispered gossip, murmurs, people sitting up a little straighter. Abbott glanced toward his staff behind him, but no one had anything to offer. Crockett moved again, flipping to Section 11 with force, the pages slapping together. "And here," she said, "is where it goes from bad to unbelievable." She held up the bill for everyone to see. "This section makes it a crime to use social media, or even a group text, to coordinate activities that might lead to disruption." She narrowed her eyes and hit him with the line that would replay on cable news for days. "In your bill, a Facebook group is a criminal conspiracy. Are you hearing yourself?" The press row went wild, phones up, cameras clicking. Even some of the Republicans at the table stopped pretending to look at their notes. Abbott forced a laugh, the kind people use when they're running out of exits. "Congresswoman," he began, slipping into a condescending tone, "as someone newer to Congress, these issues may seem more—" He didn't get to finish. Crockett cut through his sentence. "Governor, don't confuse age with expertise." A sharp crack of reaction shot through the room. Chairs shifting, reporters whispering, "Oh my God!" Staffers turning to look at one another. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a warning shot. She leaned forward, her voice low and controlled. "I know exactly what I'm reading. And what I'm reading is a bill that punishes speech, punishes assembly, and punishes dissent. You can call it whatever you want, Governor, but it's not the Constitution." Abbott didn't speak, couldn't speak. Crockett didn't give Abbott a moment to breathe. She flipped to a new stack of documents. Case summaries, arrest records, photos of ordinary people caught in the crossfire of similar laws. Her tone sharpened, not angry, but unmistakably precise. "Governor," she said, "you keep calling my concerns hypothetical, so let's talk about what actually happened in the states that passed laws just like yours." She held up the first page. "In Oklahoma, a group of grandmothers were arrested for standing outside the state capitol. Their crime? Holding signs about school funding." She set the page down and picked up another. "In Florida, environmental activists were charged with felonies for organizing a beach cleanup that included signs about pollution." Another page. "In Iowa, disability rights advocates were prosecuted simply for blocking the hallway of a senator's office for a few minutes." She leaned in, eyes locked on Abbott. "This isn't hypothetical. This is your future if this bill passes." The room was dead silent. Even those who weren't usually sympathetic to Crockett looked uncomfortable at the thought of grandmothers and disability advocates being treated like criminals. Abbott forced a tight smile, trying to regain control. "Congresswoman, with respect, those states had different circumstances, different contexts. You can't—" Crockett cut him off immediately, her voice calm but hitting harder than any shout. "Governor, the Constitution doesn't care about your context." She let the sentence sit there, heavy and undeniable. "It doesn't say freedom of speech unless your state has a certain situation. It doesn't say the right to assemble unless a governor decides it's inconvenient. The First Amendment is the First Amendment everywhere. Texas doesn't get a special version." Abbott swallowed hard. His hands tightened on the table. He tried to speak again, but the momentum in the room was gone, completely in Crockett's hands now. Crockett paused just long enough to let the weight of everything she'd said settle. Then she reached for a different document, not a report, not a case file, but a printed photo. The famous image of the Selma marchers walking across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. She held it up so everyone could see. "Governor," she said quietly, "let me ask you something simple. Under your bill, would the Selma marchers be criminals?" Abbott's face froze. He blinked, looked down, looked back up. "Congresswoman, that was a very different time, and I don't think—" Crockett didn't let him finish. No, don't pivot. Don't reach for a speech. Answer the question. The room tightened around him like a closing fist. Abbott shifted in his wheelchair, searching for footing. Well, the context of that march. Crockett leaned forward, voice sharp enough to cut through the air. If you can't say no, she said, then the answer is yes. You could feel the floor drop. A couple of Republican members instantly straightened in their seats, suddenly unsure where to look. One of them let out a small sigh, like he knew exactly how bad this had just gotten. Even staffers in the back row exchanged looks. Every camera in the room swung toward Abbott at the same time. An unmistakable swarm of lenses zooming in on the governor as a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He tried again, voice cracking just slightly. Representative, the historical circumstances? Crockett cut him off one last time, her tone low, controlled, and devastating. Governor, these were Americans marching for their right to vote. Under your bill, they would have been stopped, dispersed, and charged before their feet even touched that bridge. You don't have to say the word yes out loud. Your legislation already did. The room erupted, not with shouting, but with the kind of loud collective gasp that happens when everyone realizes the same truth at the same time. Crockett didn't yet pause. She didn't even let the room recover from the Selma blow. She turned to Section 12 like she was flipping the safety off a weapon. Governor, she said, lifting the page so the cameras could see it, this is where your bill stops being bad policy and becomes something much darker. A hush fell. Everyone knew something big was coming, but no one expected how directly she would hit. This section, she continued, tapping the text, creates civil penalties for anyone who assists a protest that leads to arrests under your act. Anyone, not just organizers, not just protesters, anyone who offers basic human aid. She didn't blink. Let me put it in plain English. Handing someone water in the Texas heat could get you sued. That's your America? The room exploded, not with noise, but with movement. Reporters shot forward in their seats. A Republican member actually mouthed, Jesus. Cameras swung like a pack of animals locking onto prey. Abbott stiffened in his wheelchair. The color drained from his face, then returned all at once. His breath caught. He tried to steady himself, but the moment betrayed him. His hand visibly shook. That is absolutely not, he stammered. Congresswoman, you're twisting. Crockett's voice sliced straight through his protest. I'm reading your bill, your words, your signature. She leaned in, tone low and devastating. And your message to Texans is simple. Help your neighbor, and the government will come after you. Abbott swallowed hard, panic flickering behind his eyes. He tried again, voice cracking with desperation. You're ignoring the real context, the broader purpose. Crockett raised a hand, calm, composed, lethal. Governor, the Constitution doesn't bend because you're uncomfortable. The First Amendment doesn't shrink because you don't like who's exercising it. And no amount of context fixes the fact that your bill treats community support like criminal collaboration. He froze, but Crockett didn't. This isn't about public safety, she said. Her voice grew sharper, every word hitting him with the force of a hammer. It's about power. It's about the government deciding who gets to speak, who gets to stand, who gets to help, and who gets punished for simply caring. Then she reached slowly into her stack of documents and pulled out something that made the entire room straighten. The pocket Constitution. Not new, not shiny, worn edges, dog-eared pages. The kind of copy someone actually uses. She held it up just high enough for Abbott and every camera to see. Her tone dropped to a calm, chilling razor's edge. Governor, she said, you don't get to rewrite this just because protest makes you uncomfortable. A ripple shot across the room. Even the air felt tighter. Abbott's head jerked up. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't confident. He looked rattled. Congresswoman, you're mischaracterizing. He tried, his voice cracking around the edges. Crockett sliced straight through him. I'm quoting your bill. She leaned in, tapping the Constitution. Word for word. The cameras swarmed him. Abbott blinked hard, trying to recover, but every attempt made it worse. "You're taking it out of context," he stammered. Crockett shot back instantly. "No, the context is right here." She tapped the Constitution again. "The First Amendment isn't fine print. It isn't optional, and it doesn't disappear because a governor signs a bill." Abbott froze, mouth half open, caught between denial and panic. Crockett lowered the Constitution to the table with a soft thud that sounded louder than any gavel. Then she delivered the kill shot. "If this bill passes—" She paused, letting the tension rise. Democracy doesn't fall in some dramatic explosion. It doesn't collapse in one headline. She leaned forward, voice tightening. It dies slowly, quietly, behind closed doors. It dies when people are too scared to speak, too scared to stand, too scared to help their neighbors. She locked eyes with Abbott, cold, steady, unflinching. "And Governor, your bill demands exactly that silence." The room blew up. Reporters gasped. Staffers stared at the floor. Even Republican members shifted awkwardly, as if the impact hit them in the chest too. Abbott's face flushed red, then pale, then red again. He gripped the table as he needed it to stay upright. He had no comeback, no talking point, no rehearsed line. Crockett didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply leaned back in her chair, the Constitution still resting between them like evidence in a trial whose verdict had already been decided. Abbott looked hollowed out, eyes down, hands tight, the confidence he carried in fading like it had been peeled off layer by layer. Then she leaned into her microphone, voice steady and unmistakably final. "Mr. Chairman," she said, "given the constitutional issues raised today, I move that this committee immediately suspend all federal funding consideration for the Texas Community Protection Act until a full constitutional review is completed." Abbott's head snapped up. His eyes widened. He knew exactly what that meant. The bill wasn't wounded. It was dead on arrival. He didn't speak. Couldn't speak. The governor, who marched into the room ready for a victory lap, now sat frozen, jaw tight, staring at a bill he could no longer defend. Crockett didn't even look at him. She didn't need to. By the time the hearing ended, the political world was already on fire. On Twitter, #Crockett destroys Abbott shot to the top within minutes. Cable news ran the clip of her holding up the Constitution on a loop. Legal analysts who had cautiously supported Abbott's bill hours earlier were suddenly backpedaling on live TV. "This section is indefensible. I have serious concerns about its constitutionality. Crockett exposed flaws I hadn't fully considered." Even conservative commentators looked stunned. It wasn't just a bad hearing. It was a political meltdown, public, brutal, and impossible to spin away. 2 weeks later, buried in a late-night press release, Abbott's office announced he would be revisiting certain provisions of the Community Protection Act. The bill was gone, buried, just a quiet retreat, because the alternative was humiliation all over again. At a town hall back in Texas, someone asked Crockett how it felt to take down a governor. She shook her head almost dismissively. "I didn't go after a governor," she said. "I went after an attack on our rights." The crowd erupted. Phones went up. The clip went viral. And just like that, the story of the Abbott hearing stopped being about a bill. It became the story of the day Jasmine Crockett walked into Congress and defended the Constitution with nothing but facts, fire, and 5 minutes of unshakable truth. If this moment made you think twice about how fragile our rights can be, then don't let it end at the closing of this video. Stay engaged, stay aware, and stay vocal. Like this video to help bring more attention to the conversations that matter. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the political battle shaping our country. Leave a comment and tell us which issue you believe deserves this level of scrutiny next. And share this story with someone who cares about protecting our freedoms before they quietly slip away. Democracy doesn't disappear overnight. It fades when people stop paying attention. So keep paying attention and keep standing up